Welcome to the Great British Quilter podcast. I'm Sarah Ashford, and as a modern quilter and founder of the Great British Quilter Instagram Challenge, I've spent the last 3 years galvanising and championing British quilters and the quilting industry. In this series, I speak to British quilt designers, fabric companies, publishers and shop owners to discover their behind-the-scenes stories and to discuss what it means to be a part of the quilting community today. Enormous thanks go to our sponsors Bernina, the choice of the enthusiastic quilter worldwide, and to Orifil. With their help, we've been able to bring this inspiring podcast to you. I'm so excited to introduce my first guest, quilter extraordinaire Jo Avery. Jo has been sewing and quilting since she was a child and began writing her blog My Bearpaw a decade ago. Her love of intricate techniques such as needle turn, applique and embroidery, combined with a passion for colourful improv piecing, allows her to embrace both traditional and modern aesthetics. She is a regular contributor to a number of quilt publications, and her first solo book will be published by Stash in early 2020. Jo enjoys inspiring others through her studio workshops in Edinburgh and the annual sewing retreats she organises. She is also an Orifil designer with 2 collections available. For this interview, I flew up to Edinburgh and met with Jo on her beautiful small holding on the outskirts of Edinburgh. We spoke about Jo's journey into quilting, her distinctive style and what inspires her. Jo also talked about events that she organises, the Thread House Retreat and the Stitch Gathering, as well as her brand new book. Jo shares how she uses social media to connect with others and what it means to her to be a part of the British quilting industry. Finally, Jo shares some top tips, which we hope you will find useful. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jo for about 5 years now, and I'm so proud to call her my friend. I know that you will love listening to her story, her infectious laugh, and all the knowledge that she has to share. Welcome, Jo. Thank you so much for being my very first guest on the Great British Quilter podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really, really honoured that you'd asked me to be your first guest. It's wonderful, and it's lovely to have you up here to do this podcast.
Oh, I'm really excited to be in Edinburgh. Any excuse. So let's get started at the beginning then. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into quilting?
Well, I've always sewn and always made things. So I can remember making my first little soft toy when I was 6 years old, and it was a red squirrel. And my sister taught me how to do a backstitch. So my sister Jane, who's also part of the Great British Quilter community now, since I've dragged her into it, she's quite a bit older than me. So she was my sewing teacher when I was little. My mum taught me to knit, and my sister taught me to sew. And my sister used to do lots and lots of dressmaking, and when I'd go and stay with her, she lived in Nottingham and I was in London, she would save all the toy patterns from her Woman's Weekly magazines the sewing magazines that had dressmaking patterns. They'd always have a sort of little toy pattern or something. So she'd save those up for me and save me all her scraps. And I'd go and stay with her in the summer holidays, and I'd make all these toys. And it was always a nice communal activity between me and my sister. And then when I was 10 years old, Jane fell pregnant with her first child, and she started to do a hexie, what we now call English paper piecing, but was then just called patchwork. She started to make a quilt for her new baby, and of course I wanted to do it as well, so I got Jane to teach me how to do it, and I started to make hexies, and I made a little clutch bag for my mum, which I don't know what's happened to actually. I'd love to see it now because it was my first bit of patchwork, and then I didn't really do any more patchwork after that, nor did Jane. And I kept sewing until I was about 14, and then I discovered boys. So I stopped sewing completely and making things, and just had fun for many years. And then I met my husband and moved in with him, and immediately had this urge to nest. I didn't really know that's what I was doing, but I just had this urge to go to John Lewis and buy some hexagon templates. I bought some metal hexagon templates, and an embroidery hoop. Didn't really know what I was doing with either of them, but I didn't actually use the embroidery hoop for a while. But I started to just get hold of some remnants. I obviously must have bought some fabric as well. And I used to go to Liberty and buy remnants, and I used to cut up old shirts and things. And I started to make this hexagon patchwork. I didn't really know anything about quilting. I didn't think I'd even seen a quilt, actually. Anyway, so a few years later, I turned this into a quilt top, and by now we'd moved up to the Scottish borders, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I had a friend there who said, "Oh, I'm in a quilt group. Come along to our quilt group. We'll all help you." So I went along, and they did tell me how to make it into a quilt, which was really, really helpful. But they also introduced me to a rotary cutter and a mat and to strip piecing and the whole world of quilting. And I was really, really hooked from then on.
And you suddenly realise, don't you, that all of these tools and gadgets make it so much easier and much more accessible.
I didn't know you could do it fast. I thought the all patchwork was just hexagons, and I think a lot of people did, because in the 70s there was just hexagons and that was it really. But I think the rotary cutter was pretty new then, because this is the early 1990s. So yeah, it was a revelation.
So would you say you have a particular style of quilting now?
Well, I think because I have been quilting for so long, really, and I sort of went on and off. I didn't quilt continually. I had a big sort of burst of passion then when my kids were little in the 90s. And there wasn't really any styles then. There was just quilting. And there also wasn't a lot of patterns then because... there just wasn't all the stuff that was available now. There wasn't really available quilting cottons. So you would look at old quilts and you would just work out how to make them. Mm-hmm. And that's still really what I do. So I do like traditional quilting, but then when I got really inspired back into quilting, really with modern quilting, about a decade ago, when I discovered people like Denise Schmidt, and I was like, oh, wow, I'd never thought about doing that with it. And I just loved that aesthetic. So I do think that I'm somewhere between modern and traditional. Sometimes I do very modern quilts, but I'm probably happier putting a modern twist on a traditional pattern and giving it my own sort of spin. I like to try and take traditional patterns and make them easier to make. But at the same time, I don't like to make really easy quilts. I like to put in some detail. So I like to add in a plique and some handwork as well, or, hand stitching on them. So I like to put the effort into quilting, definitely. I like to, some sort of more simple patterns, I want to make them more complicated, and some more complicated patterns, I want to make them more simple. I've got a very low boredom threshold, so I couldn't just stick to one style anyway. I would want to try something new all the time.
And you do bridge that gap, don't you? Because you work for publications that are more traditional, but also the modern ones as well. So it's a really lovely hybrid, I guess, of
foot in both
elements.
camps. I think that's a way of hopefully always staying in employment as far as I'm concerned. Trying to deliberately give myself as many options as possible.
Yes. And you said you were very much inspired by Denise Schmidt.
Yes.
Who else and what else inspires you?
Well, I'm inspired by lots of other quilters and their beautiful patterns. And Instagram, I've never been one for Pinterest, really. I've never bonded with that at all. So my inspiration really comes from Instagram and also blogs. Quite often I'll see a quilt on there and think, oh, I absolutely love that. But I'll never want to make that quilt. I'll want to sort of take some inspiration from it, whether it's the colours or the shape, but then build my own quilt around it. And it's the same with old traditional quilts. I won't want to just make them, I never want to make anything exactly like anybody else. I can't actually follow patterns. I always have to do my own thing. I'm sort of incapable of it, which is probably why I write my own. I'm inspired by lots of other quilts I have. I love colours, so just seeing any sort of groups of colours together can really inspire me. I'm inspired by looking at my fabric stash and just seeing a load of a lot of what inspires me is just the fabric, really. I have a thing I often say that I think we quilt because we need an excuse to justify buying fabric, really. So we love the fabric, we buy the fabric, and then we've got to do something with it so that we can buy some more,
Yes.
So we cut it up and sew it back together again. So quite often just some lovely fabric in my stash. I must use this. What can I do with it? And then also I'm very much inspired by nature. I mean, anyone that knows my work will know I do love a leaf or a tendril, and leaves, and the shape of a leaf comes up a lot in applique I do, in embroidery, and also in quilt patterns, and flowers and any sort of nature. I'm surrounded by nature here where we live, and wildlife, so birds and things like that. So yes, so shapes of nature and shapes from quilts really, and yeah, it's all about the shape and the colour.
Lovely, amazing. Your work's really distinctive and beautiful, and like you say, it does have that element of nature within it so often.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your sewing space?
It's very messy, and Sarah has been in it recently because she's staying with me. And in fact, she did say to me, because I've got I actually have my desk is on the dining table, and that's where my laptop and all my sort of notes are. And she said, do you not have a desk in your sewing room you can use, Jo? And I said, well, I do have one, but you can't actually see it, so because it's full of stuff. So yeah, and I actually did. I've got a sofa, so I've got quite a big sewing room, which is one of our spare bedrooms here. We moved to this house nearly 9 years ago now, and it kind of coincided with both my boys growing up and flying the nest, so which is great because it means I've got a whole room I haven't had to give over to a child that I can have as a sewing room. So, and it's got two sort of like smallish dining tables next to each other. They were both dining tables previously. One full of absolute rubbish, which you can't, or books, like, paper and magazines, things, which is supposed to be the desk area, which you can't see. And the other being the cutting area, which I have to keep clear because I have to work there. And every time I finish piecing and I've got to start quilting, I have to clear that area because that's where the quilt's all going to be sort of spread out while I free motion quilt it. And then my actual sewing machine is set into a table that my husband's built for me, which is really quite low because I think one of the problems with sewing machines is that most of us have put them on top of a table, like a dining table or a work table, and it's just too high. And especially if you quilt at home, you really need it to be low. So it's really low, and my chair's really low, and I used to have a lot of problems with my shoulder and neck before I did this. Now I have no problems at all. That's something you really need. If you're going to do a lot of sewing, you really need to think about lowering a sewing machine somehow.
That's really useful advice, isn't it?
Yes,
because it
definitely.
can be a barrier to quilting your own quilts.
Yes. Well, I know we're not doing tips now, but one of the things people often ask me about, because I've free motion quilt all my quilts myself, I don't have a long arm, and they often say, but can you get the quilts through the throat of the machine? And I always say, that is not your issue, because really when you scrunch up a quilt, it'll fit in your palm of your hand. You will easily get it in the throat of the machine. And when you free motion quilting, you don't roll your quilt at all. But what you need is loads of space around you. So because I clear one of these sort of dining room tables off, and then I have my sewing machine butting up against it in this lower down table, and then I also get my ironing board, put that low at the same height as the sewing machine bit, and put that at the back, and it just gives me all this space around the machine to prop the quilt up on, because that's the thing. It's not about space through the machine, it's space around.
And that's what you need, isn't it, to support that quilt?
To support it, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mustn't have it being dragged down anywhere, so you need somewhere, lots of space around. Yeah, so and then I also have a sofa bed in the sewing room, which until Sarah came you couldn't see, but I managed to find some storage space and stuff a load of stuff in there, so she didn't think she was going to hyperventilate when she came into the room. And then all my fabric stash is in these IKEA stacking boxes, so they're sort of shallow clear plastic IKEA stacking boxes, and my husband, who as you'll notice by this is incredibly handy and can make me anything, and I know not everybody has a husband like this, but so Jonathan is amazing, and he's made me these trolleys. I've got 3 of them, and they take 2 of the stacking boxes each, and then they stack right on top, so I've got basically like 6 towers of stacking boxes, and I can pull the trolleys out when I'm sort of really doing fabric pulls and stack between them, and then when I'm really running out of space, I can just buy more IKEA boxes and keep stacking them higher and higher, and they all live in the corner of the room, and they can kind of be pulled out, and then there's various other superfluous storage things in there that I really need to declutter badly, but
and decluttering is a great opportunity to realise what you've got, actually, isn't it? And
I'm not a hoarder. I do try and do it. It's just I've been really, really busy at the moment, so that's the thing that gets put aside. When I've got time, I'm going to chuck so much stuff out. So yeah, I will do it.
Have a de-stash.
Yes, well, the thing is, I don't tend to ever do those destashes because I've got a shop. So destash happens at the shop, and a lot of stuff goes to the shop. And I've got a wonderful assistant who's the manager of the shop, Jane, who is I just cannot live without, basically. And Jane takes all my scraps and turns them into little scrap packs or turns them into all sorts of things. So I take a lot of stuff in there, and then it gets remodeled and resold, or it gets given away because sometimes you just want to share the love.
Giving new life.
Well, as a designer, you do get a lot of fabric given to you to make stuff with. So I do like to give away stuff when I've got it as well. Share it around.
Can you tell us a little bit about the retreats that you run? You're very busy with those.
Yes, I now have 3, which slightly wondering whether that's too much. So I started the Stitch Gathering Retreat, and it's actually just about to have its 7th, not just about, but later this year in October it'll be its 7th event. So that it started
Time just flies,
I know,
2013.
So I was very much inspired by the Fat Quarterly retreats, which were started by the Fat Quarterly group of various quilters, including Lynn Goldsworthy and Katie Jones, and that happened in London. And in fact, it's where Sarah and I met. We met at the second one, didn't we?
We did, yes.
Yeah, so I went to the first one, and I thought, what a great idea, but there was hardly anyone that could afford to come down from Scotland to go to it, because it was July and it was central London.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, why don't I do just a one-day one in Scotland? And I actually, the first one, I had an exhibition as well, an exhibition of Scottish modern quilts. I had a much bigger shop then, I had lots of space, and we did it during the festival, Edinburgh Festival, so we could be a fringe venue. So, it was a good way of promoting the shop. And then the culmination of this exhibition was this retreat day called the Stitch Gathering. And I think we had about 60 quilters that first one, and it was very successful. So we've built up over the last few 6 or 7 years to having about 8. There's 80 tickets get sold, and then obviously with the teachers and helpers, there's about 90 of us actually there on the day. And this year's been the most successful ever as far as ticket sales. They sold out after just 2 weeks, which is amazing. So thank you very much. And it's a really great day. And I keep adding. It's just one day, but we keep kind of adding stuff to it. So we started to do an evening meal on the Saturday before, because a lot of people are coming up from elsewhere, staying for the Saturday. So we go out for a meal. There's usually about 30 of us. And then I introduced a sort of Prosecco party at the shop on the afternoon. So there's lots going on. So you can
it's a fantastic weekend.
Yes.
I've been to many of them.
I think you'd come to all of them if you could. So if you get invited. So yes. And we've just announced the teachers, so I can say Sarah will be coming to teach this year. She's going to be teaching 2 classes this year.
I am. Yes, I shall be there.
So we just announced the teachers, and we'll announce the workshop soon. It's a really fun day. And then the other things I do is the Thread House retreats, which I run with my friend partner Karen Lewis, and we've been running. We started off with Lynn Goldsworthy as well, but she's just leaving Karen and I to do it now. The first one we did 3 years ago in Bristol, so that's in the winter, in January. It's a great time to go away when everyone's got the January blues or post-Christmas blues, so it's a nice time to go away and have a retreat. And we go to a place called Folly Farm near Bristol, which we have the whole run of the place. It's a really great place. It's like an eco farm, and it's got the various barns and buildings where we can have the classrooms, and then we all gather together. It's all catered, so they come and cook amazing food for us, but it's just great to have the run of this whole place ourselves. So that's for about 45 quilters for the whole weekend, sort of Friday lunchtime to Sunday lunchtime. And we will be having another one. I think we've announced the dates already for next January. The tickets will go on sale in June. So check out the website if you're interested. You can sign up for the newsletter. And then this year we've brought in a summer retreat as well. This is a smaller one. There's just going to be about 25 of us. Going to be a bit more low key. We're not planning lots of classes. It's only going to be Karen and I teaching, and we're going to do a sort of shared project that we haven't actually announced yet, but it's in the planning stages. So a couple of weeks time, and we'll be sharing what we're going to be doing on that. And it's in the Yorkshire Dales. Again, a similar sort of place where we'll have the run of the place, a little bit smaller. And I'm really looking forward to that one, because I'm going to be able to drive down and bring a little pop-up shop as well, whereas Bristol have to fly. So
Fantastic. And you're covering quite a lot of areas of the country, aren't you, between Edinburgh and Bristol and Yorkshire?
We pretty much are, aren't we?
Yeah,
so
hopefully
there's
something for everybody. Absolutely.
So, yeah, they are fun to do.
And what are you working on right now? You're always so busy and have so many things on the go.
I'm super busy at the moment. I am doing a lot of magazine commissions, mainly for Today's Quilter, some for Love Patchwork and Quilting, and they're just starting to come in now. In that I had a bit of a break because I was working on a book, so I didn't do anything for magazines for sort of 6 or 7 months, and then now there's such a big lag period with them, so I feel like I've been working all year, but only now is the first issue coming out. So Today's Quilter's latest issue, which is out on Thursday, has got a new project for me, and then pretty much for the foreseeable future there's going to be something in Today's Quilter and some of Love Patchwork and Quilting for a while.
Going to be seeing a lot more of
seeing a lot of, and there's some amazing quilts coming up. Sarah's seen the couple, haven't you, recently?
I have seen a few sneak peeks.
So
yes.
Sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet there, but when I make a quilt, I'm often really in love with it. So I'm like, this quilt's amazing. I sometimes not, but usually I'm like, I love the quilt. I go off them, but not all of them. But so the couple have just made a favourite.
But you invest so much time in a quilt. You have to fall in love
with them. Yeah, they're like your children, aren't they really?
Yeah, they become very, very special and very precious because you know the work and the love that's gone into them.
And you've created it, your creation. Yeah, you're right. It is a little bit of a love affair, yeah.
So how do you use social media to connect with other quilters?
We talked a little bit about Instagram and it being a very inspiring place, but yes, it's a wonderful place to share. I do love Instagram. So my two main places are Instagram and also my blog. And the whole thing really started me. This whole career started on my blog, which is coming up to its 10th anniversary in June. So I'm going to be having a big giveaway, guys. So check the blog out in June. My whole kind of current career has come from that blog, so I've got a lot to thank it for. And a lot of people have stopped writing their blogs and gone on to Instagram, and I know it is much easier and quicker and on Instagram, but I still love that space to write my blog, and I've never stopped writing it. I think the longest I have gone without writing a post is maybe 3 weeks, or maybe 4 at the most. But I usually write something every week, or at the most 10 days, not usually much more than that, but usually 3 or 4 blog posts a month, because I really like the space to properly tell a story. So every quilt I make will have its own blog post, and I'll tell the story of that quilt, and I like to take it around our Shangri-La farm where we live and take lots of photos of it and just make the most of it. It's a little star of the show. It needs its own little story post. And
that's so lovely because that is digital. That will be there forever.
Exactly. It's a wonderful archive, and the 10 years of those blog posts, I can look back and even though I don't put a lot of personal stuff on, there's still enough there. When we moved here, there's stuff, various stuff about the kids at various points doing things, and there is enough there to make it almost like a bit of a diary, especially early on. It's really interesting. Even just if you look at really early posts and you see who left comments, and then you're like, oh my goodness, and it's somebody really well, or it's someone that you didn't even remember had ever left a comment all those years ago, and that now from a completely different way. So that's really nice. So I love to do my blog posts, and because why I started to write the blog in the first place was sharing and communicating. I felt I was really sort of working in isolation, and none of my friends were really into sewing at all, and I sort of tried going back to quilt groups, but I really felt like they were not appreciating what I was doing. They weren't into modern quilting at all. And then when I discovered blogs, finally, took me a while. I don't know why I never thought about looking for quilting on the internet, but I never did for quite a while. I realised that this was exactly what I needed. I could share what I was doing, share my wisdom and experience, and just communicate with people, just communicate what I was interested in.
And I think it's that thing, isn't it? You feel like you found your tribe in a way. You found people who get what you do.
And then that's been an even better benefit, that you have found this global community and real friends, all over the world. I mean, like, with more friends than you need, in a way. There's so many friends. In fact, a lot of them have, I don't have time to keep up with my non-quilting friends because there's so many. So yes, that's been wonderful. And because you do work in isolation, one of the things I love about Instagram is being able to get people's opinion and be able to get that instant feedback. You put something out and nobody reacts at all. Hardly said anything. You're like, well, I don't think I'm going to make that into a pad because nobody really. But other times you put something out and everyone goes crazy for it, and you go, oh, I think this is going to be a good new class. I'm onto something, and that is really valuable. Be able to get that immediate feedback of ideas. It saves you a lot of time, and
from the people who know,
your audience,
in asking family members and sort of real life friends.
They don't want to know anyway.
Absolutely.
So the feedback element's really good, but the sharing element as well, because obviously you're looking at other people's things, and I just think it's a really nice place. I've never had any trouble on there at all. I think we self-police so well. If anyone's ripping somebody else off or doing anything like that, or someone's stolen your photo, somebody else will know and they'll get back to you, and we all I think that's brilliant. We're like little
such a
warriors,
supportive community, isn't it?
Protecting our safe space, and I think that's great. We can all rely on each other as well. It's wonderful.
Definitely. And that leads me on nicely to my next question, actually. So what does it mean to you to be part of the British quilting community?
Well, I think it's great to have this British quilting community. When I first started the blog, I couldn't find any other British blogs. And in fact, it was really when I finally found one, which was Marguerite, Adventures in Sailing and Quilting. If anyone remembers that, she was. I happened to not long after I started the blog, and I really didn't know anybody, and nobody was reading my blog, and I just about discovered Flickr, which was a great way in, but I don't think I really knew how to use it. But what I did find was the Bloggers Quilt Festival, which Amy's creative side started, and I thought, oh, this is a good thing. I'll join in this, and I think it was only the second one she did, and the next person that added a quilt after me, because it used to just all get added in chronologically, was Marguerite, and I looked at her profile. I was, oh my God, she's in the UK. She's in England, and through her started to meet a few other British quilters and get involved in the swaps on Flickr, and eventually they started to come through, and people like Lynn Goldsworthy, she was a real galvanizer of the whole community, and started a brick quilt group on Flickr, and we started to do some brick quilt swaps, and I think it was really nice to feel like we had that identity, our own identity. And then I think what you've done with the Great British Quilter has brought that all to Instagram as well. So I'm super proud to be part of the British quilting community. I think we've got a lot to give. We've got really, really talented quilters, and I think we've got a lot of individuality and originality in what we do. And I think we went as a little tribe to QuiltCon this year, and I have to say, I think the British quilters are the party animals of the quilting world. Certainly, I think we were out there partying and taking part in everything Nashville had to offer. We were the cool girls, definitely.
Oh dear. So we'd like to offer some tips to the listeners, and I know that you have more tips than we have time for. But if you could narrow it down just to one or two, what would you like to share?
Well, I know we've been talking about social media, and I know you mentioned doing social media tips. So I did want to sort of encourage people to go on Instagram if they haven't tried already. And I know I come across lots of students who they're a little bit afraid of it. They're afraid because they've heard bad stuff about social media on the news and things, and they also just can't find a way to actually fathom what everybody's talking about, or hashtags, and how to use it.
I think Instagram gets a bad rap quite often, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it gets quite as bad rap as Twitter, but I think it can. There's been stuff on the news about various things, but the thing people don't understand is that you don't need to see any of that if you don't want to. You will just be able to follow the people you want to follow. So I would encourage people to have a go, and if they can't work out what on earth they're doing, find somebody in your family. There'll be a child or a grandchild who will know what to do with it and will help you. Or Google it. There's lots of Instagram websites out there that give you all sorts of information about how to work Instagram, how to do an Instagram story, really quite idiot proof. I mean, I am not a very techie person, and I've had to pick it up as I go along. And I would say, don't just stalk, don't just go on there and and stalking isn't really a bad term in our world, but that did sound bad. But some people, they go on, they get a profile just so they can see what everybody else is doing, but they never get that great engagement of, don't be afraid to share your photos, and don't be afraid to comment on other people's things. Everybody loves a comment or a like. Don't just get involved. Basically, don't be afraid.
And you don't have to share a lot of personal information if you don't want to
share anything. No. You can put a false name on there. You don't
have to put your face on there. You can have a quilt picture.
I would encourage people not to have a private account, because I think that puts people off. Defeats the object. Just don't put anything, any personal information on there. And you don't need to worry. Don't have a go. Get feet first in, really. And then the other tip, this is really a general sort of organising your, and I'm not massively organised, but I found this really helpful, and one of my students told me this, Barbara, so thank you, Barbara, and it's to use paper plates for organising all your cutting when you're working on a quilt.
So you mean like actual paper plates that you would have at a party?
Exactly. This is completely an inexpensive tool that you can just get them from the supermarket. And so when you're cutting up a quilt and you've got templates and you've got all the different pieces for blocks, what you do is you organise them with the paper plates. So you've got all the parts for a certain block and the templates. You put that on that paper plate and then another paper plate on top. Put the next one. You can get a big tower of paper plates with them all stacked, and it's really good. And you can write on the paper plates as well. So if you need to make some notes about what happens to this one and there, you can write on the paper plates, and then you can just keep reusing them over and over again. So it's a very inexpensive and practical little shelving system for your, for the project you've got on the go at the moment to help you organise your cutting.
That's a really, really great tip.
I think it's well. I've been using it today, and I think it works really well.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Jo.
It's been great to have you. Lovely
Always
to chat with you. And I think this is
a
fantastic idea, Sarah, and I wish you lots of luck with it. And I know some of the people that Sarah's got coming up ahead, and it's going to be great fun for all you listening at home to listen to.
Oh, well, thank you, Jo. Thanks again. It's been brilliant. Thank you once again to our generous sponsors, Bernina, the choice of the enthusiastic quilter worldwide, and also to Orifil. With their help, we've been able to bring this podcast to you, and we thoroughly hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, we would love it if you would rate, review, and subscribe to the Great British Quilter podcast. Please do tell your friends and spread the quilty love. Thank you.